Today I'd like to talk to you about ghost guns. The Supreme Court just ruled to allow the Biden administration to continue to enforce their rule that declares ghost guns as a gun under the law and therefore requires serial code numbers. I am quite surprised that they made this choice this way, considering that they just decided a little while back ago that in order for a restriction on gun rights to be constitutionally valid, it has to have historical precedents that predate the Second Amendment. Most people think that all guns have to have serial numbers. This is not true. For the vast majority of American history, we did not have serial number restrictions, that all guns had to have them. That wasn't passed until 1968. And the Second Amendment was passed in 1791, which is 166 years in between the Second Amendment being ratified and the restriction on the sale of guns with a serial code number. And even I have two of them in my collection. This one's from 1957, and it is a J.B. Higgins sold by Sears. It's not worth a whole lot, but I would never sell it anyway. And then I also have this single shot 22, which was made in 1958, just 1 year newer. So not all guns have to have serial numbers. And I feel like this restriction or rule by the Biden administration is going to get struck down. But it's going to be a split decision. They're going to decide that a gun without a serial number can be legally a gun because there's historical precedence. The vast majority of guns throughout American history were made without serial numbers. But they're also going to say that the government can't require serial numbers because there is no historical precedence for it under the new standard to determine if gun restrictions are constitutional or not. We, as a society, are going to go through some growing pains with all of the gun restrictions that are going to get struck down by the Supreme Court. I feel like in the next 4 years we're going to have a lot of gun restrictions that are going to get struck down, including modifications. There was no law restricting modification, buying modifications for your gun and modifying your gun before the Second Amendment was passed. And so all of these laws that make if you add this attachment, you have to have a permit, and if you add that attachment, you've got to, then it's illegal to own that weapon, and I feel like all that's going to go away too. And yes, more people are going to die, unfortunately. It's a horrible thing, and I hope that no one does. But the reality is that the government has abandoned us. It doesn't care about our quality of life. It doesn't care about mental health. And it has said so over and over again with all of these budgets where they can put huge, ungodly amounts of money into national defense. But they don't even care about the people. And unfortunately, when you add mental health problems and people feeling like the government has abandoned them, some of those people are going to go out and shoot up some other people. And it's a tragedy, and I hope that it doesn't happen anymore, but the reality is it's going to keep happening. And it's going to keep happening until this government, our federal government, wakes up and realizes that true national security is taking care of the people first. When the people feel like the government represents them and the people feel like they haven't been abandoned by the government, then they are less likely to go off and do some crazy shit like shoot up a school. And we need to keep that in mind when we start talking about gun control and gun restrictions and mass shootings. The reality is that the government has created the perfect situation by neglecting the people for so long that some people lash out. And then the government wants to claim victim status and use it to take away more rights and more freedoms and to restrict guns. Well, the Second Amendment wasn't just about protecting oneself from some bad guy that might want to kill you or rob you. It was also to protect you and me against an overbearing federal government. And we can't just give up our gun rights, because then with this federal government, how the 1% and the lobbyist groups have bought and paid for most of the people in Washington, they will just continue to seize our rights and our privileges until we are nothing more than cattle and nothing more than a resource to be used up, discarded, and thrown away for their benefit and their wealth. And we see it all the time. Lobbyists always working to take away our voting rights and take away our gun rights and take away women's right over choices over their own organs on their inside their body. And it's like, right there is the powerful people that pull the strings of the puppets in Washington, trying to make women property of government when we're supposed to be free people. That's proof that they will take every right away from us if we don't maintain our right to bear arms. And it may take 50 years, 100 years, but powerful people have maintained power and resources by killing, slaughtering, and treating people like they are just something to be used up. So it's a complicated situation, and it's a tragic situation, but I also feel like when school shootings happen, parents should be also pointing the finger to the government for abandoning the people, abandoning us with mental health and our quality of life. Yes, it's the shooter's fault, and yes, the shooter was the one that took away those children, but the reality is that the federal government is equally to blame and has just as much blood on their hands, in my opinion. You cannot neglect the people when it's supposed to be a government for the people, by the people, but instead we have a government for the 1%, by the 1%. And that is not the system we were promised. And so I do feel the federal government is equally to blame every time there's a school shooting. And if we want national security, then we have to start caring about the quality of life of our citizens. We have to start caring about, do people have enough food? Do they have housing? Do they have a job that pays a living wage, that they don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs where they have no time with their kids, which is creating more of a mental health problem with younger generations. It's a downward spiral. So these are some of the thoughts and opinions I have around the ghost guns and the school shootings, because it's all a complicated web and it's all connected. And we can't talk about one little part about gun restrictions or gun rights without talking a little bit about some of these other things. So that's about it for today. If you have any questions, send them to me. I'll try to answer them. I've been trying to answer as many questions as I can that I've been getting as a U.S. Senate candidate. I just feel it's important for you to know the rationale and thought process behind why I support the things I support and why I don't support other things.